Okay. So as Samara mentioned, this is our 11th webinar in the EPOCH Practice series, co-organized with the Housing First Europe Hub. EPOCH Practice is a project co-funded by the European Union to promote knowledge and capacity building in support of the European Platform on Combating Homelessness. It also has financing from the DIAL in France, the King Baudouin Foundation in Belgium, and the Council of Europe Development Bank. It's a 2-year project, so we're coming near the end in the next few months, but we do have one more webinar coming up early next year. So if you follow our bulletin or our LinkedIn page, you'll find out about that webinar. But we're very glad to see you all here. And hopefully it's going to be an interesting session. I'm going to hand back over to Samara.
Great. Thank you, Saoirse. So I have the pleasure of introducing two excellent colleagues from Austria. I have their bios in front of me, so I think I'm gonna read them out a bit so I don't make any mistakes. But I think it's really a great opportunity to take a bit of a deep dive into Housing First in Austria, and in particular, how it developed from, from the sort of both sort of a bottom-up and top-down approach, and I think it'll be really interesting to hear from both Emine Oezkan and Andrea Zierler about how that got started and how it's working and where they're at now. So Emine Oezkan is a program manager for WOHNSCHIRM Housing First and the director of Housing First Austria. She's a certified Housing First trainer and looks back on 7 years in social services provided for people affected by homelessness, including as the head of the Housing First program at the Viennese NGO Neuner House. Emine managed the pilot program Arriving Home with BAUWO, which is the Austrian homelessness NGO umbrella organization. And Emine often represents the Housing First approach at international conferences and meetings, and she's committed to discussing challenges, reflecting experiences, and creating new ideas for implementing Housing First. Andrea Zierler is the head of Department for Social Policy Matters in Housing in the Federal Ministry of Social Affairs of Austria. Under Andrea's leadership, the WOHNSCHIRM, the federal program to prevent and end homelessness, focused on eviction prevention and Housing First. Prior to joining the federal ministry, Andrea spent over 10 years as a specialist at Fonds Soziales Wien, the city of Vienna's social fund, in the Department for Homelessness Assistance, where she worked on establishing and expanding the Viennese homelessness model, including quality standards, funding, strategy, and European cooperation. So I think it's great that we start from that idea of European cooperation, and as the format of the webinar is that we'll hand over now to Andrea and Emine for a presentation, but we would really like to encourage everyone to ask questions. There's an opportunity to ask them in the chat if you want as we're going along, and then we'll absolutely open up for discussion and chat and like question and answer after the presentation. So don't hesitate to pop things into the chat as we go through, and then we'll have lots of time for discussion as well. So I'll hand over to both of you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Samara. As a first thing, I'll try to share our screen. So let me know if it works.
Yeah, it's
perfect. Great. Okay. So thank you very much for having us. Good morning to all of you. We are very happy to get this opportunity to present WOHNSCHIRM at this webinar. So what can you expect today? Missing, sorry. Okay. Okay, so what will you expect today? At first, we will give you a brief overview of the situation regarding homelessness in Austria. Then you will learn how the Austrian Federal Ministry of Social Affairs together with NGOs, has been working around 4 years now to end homelessness through a nationwide integrated support program with a very strong focus on housing-led solutions. And as Samara said, together we will trace the path from pilot projects to a nationwide structured approach. So let's get started. As you all know, housing is more than a basic need. It's a fundamental element of social security and as well a precondition for social participation. The housing situation forms the foundation for other central areas of life, such as education, work, and health. We believe that in a strong welfare state, access to housing is not a luxury, but a public obligation. And providing the population with affordable, high-quality housing is one of the most important social and political challenges of our time. But as you can see on this slide, housing is under increasing pressure, also in Austria. The challenges in the area of housing are reaching into the heart of society. For around 1 million people in Austria, housing costs represent a heavy financial burden. 20,500 people were registered as homeless in 2023, and experts estimate that the number of unreported cases is significantly higher. Women in particular often seek private solutions out of shame, ending up in precarious living situations that can lead to dependencies. Women are underrepresented in homeless shelters and thus also in official statistics. Furthermore, 390,000 people, which is around 6% of Austrian population, have experienced an episode of homelessness in their lifetime. While homelessness not only leads to material hardship, but also to social exclusion and has a drastic impact on the mental and physical health of those affected. Homeless people die 20 years earlier than the average population. People without a permanent residence also find it much more difficult to find work, to develop long-term perspectives. All of this, of course, entails high follow-up costs for the state. At the political level, as well as in administration, responsibilities in the area of housing and homelessness are very fragmented. On federal level, as you can see, 4 different ministries are involved. And additionally, the governments of the 9 federal states have responsibilities in the fields of housing construction, funding, financial aids related to housing and homeless services. You can now imagine that in this context, long-term structural change requires a great deal of coordination and cooperation. So what happened during the last 4 years in this area in Austria? It all began in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, when the federal parliament passed measures to mitigate the social consequences of the pandemic. On one hand, 24 million euro were provided in order to prevent evictions due to rent arrears. On the other hand, large-scale pilot projects using a Housing First approach were funded. You may have heard about these projects managed by BABO and titled Arriving Home, and the second one, Housing First Austria. From 2022 to 2023, the inflation as a consequence of war in Ukraine required a reinforcement of measures to avoid evictions and fight homelessness. And therefore, the federal parliament provided another 200 million euro and passed a law that allowed for setting up WOHNSCHIRM as a nationwide integrated support program to prevent and end homelessness. This slide summarizes our 3 strands of WOHNSCHIRM, which literally translates as housing umbrella. So you can see it in the brand mark. The goals of these strands are, as mentioned before, prevention of homelessness, energy support, which means we are able to support households that are directly affected or threatened by a disconnection of power in the household. And our Housing First strand, Emine will describe later on in more detail. So what does WOHNSCHIRM do? We think that when dealing with homelessness, a functioning welfare state needs both prevention and intervention. And with WOHNSCHIRM, the Ministry of Social Affairs has created a tool that combines both prevention and intervention. So we focus on measures for prevention of evictions, and on the other hand, on the sustainable elimination of homelessness based on a Housing First approach. A network of, at the moment, more than 80 counseling centers throughout Austria supports people in stabilizing their living situation and preventing new emergencies. What support services does WOHNSCHIRM offer? The first and oldest strand, WOHNSCHIRM Miete, which translates into housing umbrella rent, offers prevention of eviction and support for a change of residence. In the prevention of eviction field, we do social work counseling, always combined with a one-time payment of rent areas. And in the other strand, change of residence, we do social work counseling combined with a support payment for moving into a new, more affordable, more suitable flat. The second strand, WOHNSCHIRM Energie, offers counseling on energy savings, switching providers, and applying for support at other places, together with a one-time payment of outstanding energy bills in order to prevent energy cuts. I'm not going into detail for the Housing First strand because Emine will do this later on. On the next slide, you can see the formal requirements for getting access to the program. I'm not going into detail at this point, but what needs to be said is that, especially in the Housing First part, our definition of the target group is very broad. It includes all types of homelessness according to the EPOCH definition, also including precarious and unsecure housing situations. This allows us to support a comparably large share of women who tend to be underrepresented in formal statistics of homelessness. On this slide, you can see the counseling centers throughout Austria. You can also see that there are still some blind spots, especially when it comes to WOHNSCHIRM Housing First, but we're working on that. So how does it all work from a structural point of view? People in housing emergencies contact one of these around 80 WOHNSCHIRM counseling centers, which are run by different NGOs in all federal states. There they receive advice on the services offered by WOHNSCHIRM, and they are assisted in applying for the support they need. The counseling centers forward the applications to the responsible nationwide processing center. There, the application is reviewed, a decision is made on the approval of the requested benefits, and cash payments are initiated. There are 2 processing centers in place, one for WOHNSCHIRM Miete and Energie, and the other one for the Housing First strand. The role of the Ministry of Social Affairs is that of the contracting authority. So it is responsible for monitoring, for reviewing the implementation of the program in accordance with the directives, for further development of the program, and for coordination and exchange at the state level. Before I hand over to my colleague Emine, here's a brief overview of current performance data of WOHNSCHIRM. You can see that since the start in March 2022, we have supported almost 36,000 people in over 16,000 households through our eviction prevention measures. Per month, we approve approximately 130 applications for energy support, and last but not least, our newest strand, WOHNSCHIRM Housing First, started in October 2024, has already accompanied more than 900 people into new permanent homes. So I'll hand over to Emine at this point. Maybe there are already questions, or shall we just go on?
It's up to you. Would you like to do some questions now, or maybe we do Housing First as well and do all the questions after? It's quite open.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Samara. Hi, everyone. It's very good to be here. So, yeah, Housing First and the principle, of course, you all may know it very well. Maybe I'm allowed to sum it up. So the Housing First principle, we know that to end homelessness sustainably, a home is the one thing which is needed above all. So the Housing First approach has proven to be a very sustainable concept for ending homelessness. Internationally, we know that, but also in Austria, the approach has been brought into the homelessness services 15 years ago. And we have some areas, for example, the city of Vienna, with years of experience in providing Housing First. So currently, as Andrea said before, the Austrian federal government program also attaches to the importance to Housing First, which is very new to us in that area. So the Lisbon Declaration, which you all know, of course, has also been signed by the Austrian government in 2021. And this is just some context to start with. So, of course, the Housing First approach is a counter model to this national traditional staircase model, with having a very broad target group, as Andrea mentioned before. We not only do reach people sleeping rough, experiencing rough sleeping, but also people who are in hidden homelessness, for example, women being in violent or depending relationships. But also we can provide housing and support for people who are at the moment in emergency shelters or maybe in temporary housing under conditional circumstances. So our approach to Housing First is broader than in some other areas. So my organization, Housing First Austria, is a branch association of the umbrella organization BAVO, and we were founded last year. And our core tasks in processing the program WOHNSCHIRM Housing First is, of course, we are reviewing the applications brought in by Housing First service users. We are processing the payment of benefits, and what we also do, and which is very important, is knowledge management and knowledge transfer on Housing First issues, and also the further development of quality standards within the service centers, for example, by conducting quality audits. Another task is our stakeholder management, which I'm going to talk about a little later. So we are like a point of contact for the counseling centers and also for the Ministry of Social Affairs and for all the other stakeholders we are working together. Here you can see the map of Austria once again, and the location of the counseling centers by now. As you can see, we still have some work to do, but what is very interesting is that with that program, we can provide housing first, not only in the urban areas of Austria, but also in the rural ones, which is very interesting because there are, for example, federal states which did not have a very profound system of homelessness services before. Sometimes it was only, a bus ticket to the capital of Austria. The ticket to Vienna was like the service provided in some areas long time ago. By now we have Housing First also in those areas, and it is very interesting and good development that we are very proud of. As I mentioned before, one focus that we have in the processing center is the knowledge management. We have in those 51 counseling centers, of course, lots of colleagues, lots of Housing First frontline workers. And we know that it is very important to share experiences and to learn from each other and to go into exchange and discuss questions together, not only within the own organization and within the own NGO, but also nationwide. So we have the knowledge management and training in the program WOHNSCHIRM Housing First. It is very helpful to be a certified Housing First trainer, and thank you, Housing First Europe Hub, for that. We have, for example, communities of practice on Housing First topics. We have webinars also on very important topics and issues. We do have one annual conference in Austria for all the frontline workers, and we do also case studies together to have like finding solutions for difficult questions. Yeah, here I wanted to share with you a very nice picture of the conference this year. We are looking forward to the next one, and yeah, as you can see, it is a very motivated group of colleagues here. In our stakeholder management, we also do have very interesting work that we are doing. Housing First in general, and also WOHNSCHIRM Housing First, does work and is successful because of cooperation. And we know that not only since the program, but also in the projects that we did before, funded by the Ministry of Social Affairs and organized by the BAVO, the stakeholder management in our context means that we do cooperate very intensely with the housing providers in Austria, and also with all the social organizations of the homelessness services, but also with administration and politicians, and also with research. On these very nice pictures, you can see an event we had in October this year. It was our WOHNSCHIRM Housing First Gala. It was a very festive happening, and our Minister of Social Affairs, Corinna Schumann, she held a very also inspiring speech on WOHNSCHIRM Housing First. You can see her on the right picture with the red blazer. And in the middle, you can see a picture of the representatives and also the chairman and deputy chairman, Deputy Chairwoman, of the Limited Profit Housing Associations. The Limited Profit Housing Associations is a very unique organization or association in Austria, as we have federal law also on limited profit housing, and there are up to 170 different limited profit housing associations in Austria, and we cooperate very strongly with them, and most of our houses and apartments that we can offer the Housing First users come from the limited profit sector. You can also see on the left slide one thing that we always try to do, having an international perspective. On that gala, we had Ali Bargu from the OECD also commenting and having perspectives on the Housing First program. So this is one of the key takeaways of the program, having the strong cooperations and learning to speak the language of the other sectors and bringing them together on regular basis. We don't do galas all the time, of course, obviously, but we have meetings a lot in all the federal states, online and in person, and it is very, very fruitful. Yes, the target group of the program, as Andrea mentioned, is very broad. We do have all the ethos criteria for homelessness, meaning people sleeping rough, but also, for example, women in women's shelters or people in shelters or, for example, leaving prison, of course, also. So it is a broad definition. For WOHNSCHIRM Housing First, individuals need to have their primary residence in Austria. They need to be adults, except for the children within a family situation. And there is also, they need to have a need for support. We know that Housing First goes very closely with social work and Housing First. And we do have the orientation on the not EPOCH, EUSIC, thank you, the European statistics, not the combating homelessness, the income of the people being at risk of poverty. So in practice of WOHNSCHIRM Housing First, there are 4 steps and 2 phases that we are monitoring, and people are being assisted. So the first step is getting in touch with the counseling center and having like a checkup if the target group is okay, and then the organization help the service users to hand in an application to us. The support starts immediately after our check, and the service users are supported by finding an apartment, and also supported in all other issues that are on the individual level of importance. When matching has been done, you know, a person and a housing and a house are matched, then we can provide the payment of upfront costs. I will explain in a minute what that means. And the second phase of the support starts while moving into a place and also after the moving. If it comes to an end of counseling, because the counseling is on a basis of voluntarity. So, and if it ends, then an agreement for rent monitoring service for eviction prevention or apartment security is also possible. So the The services which we provide is in that very first column, you see the counseling and also finding of the accommodation or flat. Here we have remuneration for the service organizations or for the service centers. The interesting thing in the nationwide program is that we have common standards over like whole of Austria, and there is a maximum of transparency about also these payments. I will come to that also in a minute. To understand the program, and which is also what is possible in Austria, I need to tell you just a little bit about the limited profit housing associations once more, because due to legal requirements, there is a law, as I said before, and also due to high subsidies, rents in that sector of the housing market are and also stay lower than on the private housing market. But there are so-called upfront costs, financial contributions. It is not the same as deposits. The financial contributions are a very huge hurdle or an obstacle for our target group. And as a program, we can support with that hurdle and provide access to very affordable housing for those who need it most. So the coverage of upfront costs, therefore, is our second column here. We can provide deposits up to 12,000 euros and financial contributions up to 30,000 euros per household. We can transfer directly to the landlords. If there is an end of tenancy, the person moves out for whatever reason, the amount is refunded to the Ministry of Social Affairs. The third and last one of these services is the start support. It is to covering, for example, a kitchen or a washing machine, up to 800 euros directly to the Housing First service user. So another slide just to show the two phases in the individual counseling process. Applications might sound a little very technical. It is interesting that in this program of WOHNSCHIRM Housing First, we created applications that are not only written by social workers, but jointly together with the service users. And I will share my next slide. There is, so sorry. We have in these two phases each 5 intensity levels. So if someone needs very intense care and support, it is also possible in the program. But also people who might not be very open to an intense care, they can also apply with a lower intensity, for example. And the some relevant criteria for that classification is, for example, the size of the household. Is it, for example, a single person, or is it a family with children, maybe children in care of the welfare situation? The age of the person, of course, also matters. Gender and maybe the current living situation, for example, rough sleeping or being in a supported setting. An income is necessary for WOHNSCHIRM Housing First, of course, because people get a direct contract, renting contract with the housing provider, so they need to have an income. In Austria, there are systems of social welfare support and social, not funding, but I will think about the English word. Maybe I will say that later. The social work, Samara, you can help me later out. Social work also deals with health issues, of course, including mental health. And also we have to work with social benefits. Thank you, Andrea. That's the word I was looking for. Language skills. If someone needs an interpreter, of course, also has an impact on the intensity of the Housing First support. Of course, mobility and special needs. For example, if someone does need support with, you know, going from a place to the doctors, or if someone needs a wheelchair, then there are more housing or home visits, for example, and not only meetings in the office. So, of course, the definition of support goals is made together. So, Housing First supports is very individual, and also the orientation on resources and recovery is important to the intensity of the support. One quick example of a Housing First counseling process. This is Michaela. She is 32 years of age, and because of a breakup, there was loss of housing, and after that, she also lost her job because of that crisis she had. So Michaela is in a very precarious living condition. Sometimes she can stay with friends. Sometimes she can stay with people she doesn't know too well. But yeah, because of her situation, she uses sometimes these situations also. From time to time, she can also stay in emergency shelters, but she doesn't, you know like that too much. And Michaela, because of these problems, she has a need for support. And as she knows, of course, the counseling centers in her area, the NGOs that work where she lives, she can bring in an application for the first phase, and together with the social work support, she can find an apartment 3 months after beginning of that process. Together with her social worker, she applies for the second phase and also for the upfront costs. And after our control of the applications, Michaela is she can move into that apartment from the limited profit housing sector, and we can provide 4,200 euros as upfront costs, and also start support with 620 euros. And also the social work support continues. And in case Michaela moves out, one day there is still the rent monitoring, and the social services can stay in touch with her if there are any problems. Yes, and with that example, I am handing it back to Andrea. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So from this very individual, practical level, we're coming back to a more structural level. As you know, the subtitle of this webinar is From Pilot Project to Comprehensive Public Policy. So therefore, Emine and I asked ourselves, what the WOHNSCHIRM program actually entails. Where does it go beyond being an innovative project in the field of homeless services? And can it actually be described as a comprehensive public policy? As an answer, we have identified 4 factors that in our eyes qualify it for being comprehensive public policy. But of course, we're looking forward to discuss that with you. So the first point we identified is the integration of eviction prevention and Housing First. Within the program, as you already heard, We combine prevention of eviction and housing first. This allows for early structured intervention when housing-related problems occur. And this, of course, is important for every single client or family who is not forced to leave one's home. But in times of rising rents and shortage of affordable housing, this is also crucial from an economic point of view. We simply cannot afford to lose any housing unit that is generally affordable and of good quality. Furthermore, it also allows us to take care of high-need clients who are able to stay in their housing by offering the same services and methods of social work as for our Housing First clients. The second factor we identified is that we are putting lots of effort in building strong partnerships across different sectors. This we do to enable systematic change. Therefore, all necessary stakeholders must be on board. But it also requires appropriate resources, both financial and in time. Problems must be communicated openly and transparently in order to build trustworthy relationships with all our partners. And another point is visibility. We think that visibility and recognizability are essential, not only in politics, but also, or maybe especially, in the housing markets. And therefore, we have put significant effort into building a strong brand mark when communicating in the housing market.
The next one is the transparency regarding the guidelines, contracts, and also the remuneration of the services. We have uniform quality standards, or we are developing uniform quality standards, and we are always further developing these. So the ability to respond flexible to different regional conditions must be carefully balanced with the needs of for transparency and also for the consistent of quality. This is, Austria is a quite small country, but we do have 9 federal states and lots of different social organizations and NGOs. So the issues of scalability, must be taken into account as early as the pilot project design stage. And this is a key takeaway in that part. So the rapid growth almost always comes with a loss of quality when not investing into proper onboarding. This is very crucial. And with that training and quality management I mentioned before, we do have an answer to that. The fourth takeaway, or the fourth criteria here, is the broad target group. We mentioned it once or twice in that presentation, but what makes WOHNSCHIRM very unique is its broad definition of target groups. By including people who are, for example, in precarious housing conditions, we are able to reach a group of particularly vulnerable people, for example, who live in very dangerous situations while being overlooked in official data and also in the statistics. So after these 4 points, we would also share some recent challenges we are facing. So the potential and the challenges go hand in hand. At this moment, the program is. Also, I'm so sorry, Andrea.
Oh, you can go on.
Yeah, but at this moment, the program is limited in duration until the end of next year. But this is by now the situation. But I will hand over now.
Well, it's as Emine said, it's limited until the end of 2026. Its continuation is currently negotiated at the political level, and we are very confident to be able to keep on working on that. not least because of the positive results from an economic perspective, but at the same time, the austerity measures currently required in the federal budget are making it very difficult to continue and scale up the program. So, yeah, we'll have to wait for the necessary political decisions being made. The second challenge we also face in Austria is affordability of housing. Currently, the affordability of housing also at the individual level is under pressure. We are seeing social assistance and housing subsidies, which are in the responsibility of the federal states, is being increasingly restricted. And this makes it difficult to see a way forward because the WOHNSCHIRM support program is based, as you heard, on the principle that affordable housing conditions are possible for our clients.
The last one, the WOHNSCHIRM program was created as a crisis management measure. It grew rapidly within a very short period of time. So as a result of this history, it has a blind spot when it comes to systematically considering the user perspective and integrating peer work or peer support. This area has to be developed in the future, but I must also say we do know the effectiveness of peer work from programs or projects in Austria or within Europe, and we do learn from our colleagues as well. And yeah, as I said, we are working on that also in the near future.
Yeah, to come to an end, I think overall we can assume that with WOHNSCHIRM, we have been able to create a program that is accurate, sustainable, as well as cost efficient. You can see a couple of numbers on this slide when you compare the economic costs of evictions compared to the amount of money you need to save a home through WOHNSCHIRM Miete, for example. Then the broad definition of the target group allows us to include very vulnerable groups, such as women in unsafe housing conditions, to be included in the program. That makes us very proud. We also see that previous evaluations show that this program is very sustainably and the targets are being achieved. But nevertheless, we keep monitoring. So thank you very much for your attention so far, and we are happy to answer your questions.
Wow, thank you both very much. I really appreciated the depth that you went into, but also I have to say it's sometimes rare these days to have a PowerPoint presentation that actually illustrates what people are trying to say instead of just sort of spelling it out. And I really thought that the way you took us through the program was very, very helpful and really, really useful to be able to see the differences in the programs and see how specifically people are supported. And the step-by-step process was really, really helpful to understand. So thank you really, both of you very much for that. I see that there are a couple of questions in the chat. I don't know, Saoirse, do you want to take on the questions, or shall I read them out?
Yeah. Or if anybody who wrote a question wants to turn on their camera and ask themselves, you're also super welcome. Arnaud, I see you put a question in the chat if you want to fire ahead.
Yeah. So my question, thank you first for this presentation, very interesting. My question was about the matching process with the housing and the people that are in the program. I was wondering how many options they were given and if they could refuse any proposition of
Yes,
housing, and up
yes.
to how many uh, no's they will be out of the program. I don't know. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Arno, for the question. Of course, people can refuse a housing, so it has to be voluntarily. So no one is forced to take, a rental contract with a house they don't want. The housing market in Austria is also under a lot of pressure. So it is most of the times people wait for one or maybe a second offer, and in that process before a matching has happened, social work has a very intense clearing on what are the needs for the house. For example, what is the affordability? Does it have to be on the first floor because there are lots of children, for example, and for a single mother, or a person using a wheelchair? Or is it due to safety reasons important not to be on the first floor? So social work can do very good clearing. So when there is an offer, then the matching happens quickly, usually. Of course, we also have made the experience that after being in a very vulnerable position of homelessness experience, sometimes people also agree for a rental contract, but when it comes to do the signing, they might as well change their minds. So it's all happened, it's possible, and it's okay in the program. But we do not have a housing stock that we can offer, but our colleagues in the service centers, they look very proactive for affordable flat within the cooperations also. Is that answering your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
I see there was another question from Sharon McKibben. I don't know if she wants to ask it. And then I see that somebody has their hand up as well. But Sharon, do you want to ask it out loud, or shall we read it out?
Maybe I can read it out. No problem. So Sharon asked, before someone is offered a self-contained apartment, do you provide communal housing based on the Housing First principles?
I'm sorry, can I get the question once more?
So she asked, before someone's offered a self-contained apartment, do you provide communal housing based on the Housing First principles? So I guess she's asking if before the individual units there's a communal phase, perhaps.
So the situation in Austria is highly diverse regarding the situations to live for people who are experiencing homelessness. So it can be, for example, that a person who applies for Housing First support is rough sleeping. And of course, the service center will support the person to have, like, for example, a place in a shelter, or in a housing unit that is provided by a social organization or some things like that. This is beforehand, before making the applications at the Housing First program, but also at the same time. So, so the answer is yes, if needed, but also the houses that we have are all scattered. So the Housing First apartments are all scattered, and we do not have like a Housing First unit that we can offer for people, like as a very low threshold alternative.
Temporary housing is not part of the program, but of course it's a task of social work to organize something for the person until the final apartment within the Housing First program is found.
Thank you. I think that's clear. Feliciano, you have a hand raised if you want to ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Feliciano Giudicone from the Italian Trade Union of Construction Workers, FILE-CGIL. I lost just the beginning of your presentation, but so I'm sorry if I missed out something. But I had actually three small questions. One is about the legislation on limited profit housing and the association on limited profit housing, just to know where we can find out more, if there is a legislation available in English, for instance, or some evaluation reports, because I find it very interesting. The second question was on the eviction, not on the evictions. Actually, you said that the tenants are getting basically a subsidy if they are hosting people included in the program, but that they have to give it back if, for whatever reason, the persons leave their home. I wanted to know more about the mechanism, because I guess if the person leaves because, the person gets in a better situation, look for another home, I guess the tenant doesn't lose the subsidy. So I wanted to know how this mechanism of incentive and disincentive works out. And then if you are having, how you care about relationships with neighbors. If you're facing some obstacles because they don't want, I don't know, former offender or whatever live next to them, how you're dealing with that. I see already one answer in the chat. Thanks a lot.
So we'll try to start with the first questions. We will put a link to a website in the chat where you can find information about limited profit housing.
Gerhard Schützinger.
Yeah. Yeah, our colleague Gerhard already posted it, so that should be answered. The second question about paying back support within the eviction prevention program is no, people do not have to pay it back. Within eviction prevention, we only cover open rents. So we cover the rent areas, we pay it directly to the landlord, and in order to secure the apartment, so they don't have to pay it back, because our clients are under the level of poverty, of a risk of poverty, so it wouldn't be possible for them within years.
No, sorry, I meant the landlord. Not the tenant. Sorry, my mistake. I mean, if you get back the money from the landlord, and
not in that case, yeah, in because it's rent areas, and it's not. There's no basis for paying that back from the landlord. But in the case of Housing First, for deposits and for this kind of financial contribution, renters have to make for getting limited profit housing. It is paid back when the contract ends. So if a Housing First client decides to move out after a couple of years because maybe he's moving to his partner or for whatever reason, the contract ends and the financial contribution is paid back by the landlord directly to the Ministry of Social Affairs. So that kind of support is never in the hands of the client. Is this an appropriate answer to your question?
Yeah, so basically it's like a guarantee fund.
Yeah.
So if the person fails to pay, then the money is received, otherwise not. Or like the landlord keeps it, and just in the event then there are problems, it can maintain, otherwise
yes, in the case of deposit, yeah, it works like that, of course.
Okay, thanks a lot.
And for the third question, thank you also for this one. Yes, neighborhood issues, if there are some conflicts, the Housing First service users would get support by the social workers if they want to. But as I said before, what people have is a very regular rental contract in scattered housing. So they are tenants like their neighbors with all the same rights and also obligations. This is very important in that program. So we have like inclusion into the regular housing market. So the neighbors don't necessarily know that their new neighbor has been homeless before. So there is on the doorbell, there is no your name and also Housing First. It's just your name. So it's your choice to tell your neighbors about your life, or neighbors won't know that the visitor you're having is a friend or a social worker. So there is anonymity, and also we think that this way of Housing First support is also destigmatizing. So it is their choice to share their stories with their neighbors if they want to. And of course, if there are problems, they can ask their social worker for help, and then they can discuss should the social worker get in touch, for example, and also should they introduce themselves as social worker of Housing First, or people can make choices about how they want to solve conflicts within their neighborhood. But of course, it can happen in all living situations, with children or not, so, and also with substance use or not, and there are different situations. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
I don't see any hands at the minute, so I was wondering if I could take the opportunity to ask a question, if that would be all right. I just had a question. Well, I have several, but I'll start with one. My first question was about prevention and eviction prevention, because I think, as far as I know, this is one of the only and certainly one of the best approaches to include Housing First and prevention in the same policy, in the prevention of eviction or prevention of homelessness. And I was just wondering if you could say a bit more, like, how does this prevention of eviction work, and in particular maybe in the different segments of the rental market? So you have public housing in places like Vienna, you'll have like your limited profit housing, but are there people also being prevented from being evicted from the private rental sector as well?
Yes,
So
of course, at large scale. So we have many clients in the private rental market, and it works like, they can get in touch with one of our counseling centers. They can find it on the website WOHNSCHIRM.com, so they can easily find out which counseling center is in a good near their place. So they get counseling there. The counselors, the social workers make a financial plan with them. They also contact the landlord. They try to negotiate if it's possible to pay in tranches, or if it's possible to wait a bit more until income is secured for the client. And they also make an offer of paying the outstanding bills in order to keep the housing. Of course, the landlord has to be on board with this to stop the process regarding moving out the client, and to stop the eviction. So it only works if the landlord is on board, if it's already at the court, and then we pay the outstanding bills, and the person can stay in his or her home. And we also have a look at how sustainable this kind of support is, because it only makes sense when there's a good relation between income and housing costs. So we always have a look at how much income does the client have, maybe there are also cases where we say it doesn't make any sense to secure this kind of housing because children already have moved out, the flat is too big, too expensive, and we try to support the person to move to a smaller flat, for example, which is more affordable, and the client gets support in that way.
So is it always the tenant themselves who seeks out the counseling help from the WOHNSCHIRM counseling centers, and that triggers the process? Or is there earlier triggers from rental arrears or other sorts of inability to pay? Just how does the sort of process get triggered? Does it come from the accessing those counseling centers? And if so, how do people find out? Do you know how people are finding out about them?
Actually, there is a legal basis in Austrian law that also allows mayors to get active. So the court has to inform the mayor in the hometown of the renter if he or she is threatened by eviction, and the mayor can inform social organizations to get in touch with the client. So that's also a way that works quite well, depending on which town, which city it is. Yeah. But we are that's also a good point, because we're thinking about a more structural solution and trying to figure out at the moment how we can make this information how we can get this information even earlier and on a more structured level.
Great. Thank you. Are there other questions, or
maybe I can also ask a question if we're waiting for anybody else to raise a hand or put it in the chat box, if you're still wondering something. But I'm wondering about the prospect of transferability, and I know that there's some other ministries in other European countries in the meeting. In some countries, Housing First is very established, has a long history, but in other countries, it really doesn't exist or is only really beginning. So I'm thinking, if another European country was thinking to themselves right now, okay, let's try replicate what Austria has done, what do you think are the core tenets of the WOHNSCHIRM Housing First that they should carry over? Like, what for you are the core blocks of the program that, if it would be transferred to another country, that really would need to be there to be effective?
That's a tough one.
It's a tough one.
Well, one point is we already mentioned that you have to have your stakeholders on board from an early stage. Yeah, you have to think about how pilot projects may be scalable. Yeah, it doesn't help if you're piloting Housing First or if you're piloting eviction prevention for a very, very specific target group with a very specific type of housing. That doesn't help if you really want to have a structural approach. Well, what else?
I mean, from an NGO point of view, I think it can be very powerful to, lobby for housing as a human right. And I think that decision makers and administration, it is very easy to understand in the end, or at the beginning, that housing is a human right. So I think if you plan a program and you agree on this human right, so to say, then you have to think about how can we not create new parallel structures and a second housing market or more shelters or more situations with conditional settings, but to include vulnerable people and homeless persons into regular housing market and in affordable housing. And if it's not affordable in that country, then there are other decisions that have to be made. But I think this could be also like a tip from Austria.
Thank you. I think that's a really good point also, that it needs to be systematic and embedded in the broader structures and legislation as opposed to being a standalone separated project. I don't see any more hands, Samara. I see Samara's hand.
I have a hand. Sorry. Just because it follows on a little bit from Saoirse's question, what you guys were just saying is just in terms of, obviously, you've done an excellent job of bringing those key stakeholders together. And I just wondered if there were any sort of, you touched on it a bit in the presentation, but any sorts of challenges around bringing those stakeholders together? Are there some that are maybe harder to get to around the table? Any sort of tips for success for other ministries looking to do this? What sort of tips for how to make this multi-stakeholder cooperation a reality?
Well, you have to invest a lot of time. Yeah, as I said, it doesn't work as fast as you might assume. That's one thing. The other thing maybe is our stakeholders are visible within the program. Yeah, they are not in the background. Yeah, we talked to them in very, like Emine mentioned our Housing First Gala. Yeah, they can meet there. They can be part of something really good, of something that really makes life better for many people, and I think that's a great incentive.
Great. That sounds like a really good a good answer, and I think probably it sounds very effective as well. I do see somebody has raised their hand now. Darina Kavlova.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm from Slovakia, the Ministry of Labor, Social Affairs and Family. I enjoyed your presentation very much, so thank you. It was really useful. And I just wanted to ask two very practical questions. One of them was related to the benefit that you mentioned could be provided to the landlord in case that the person in Housing First has a low income. So I was just wondering where maybe I could find more details about what are the conditions for persons to be eligible for this contribution, or how many such persons you have in your program. And the second question I wanted to ask was about the evaluation and data collection. So what data do your users have to provide in order to be allowed to enter into the program? What I mean is that sometimes what we have to deal with here in Slovakia is that we want to somehow protect people with low threshold needs, and so there are not too many data that are collected about them, which is on the one hand quite good, but on the other hand it makes it then difficult to evaluate what is going on and how the programs are or are not successful. So thank you.
Well, for the last point of your question, actually, if you want to sign a rental contract on the housing market, it is necessary to to provide a lot of data to the landlord, because the landlord wants to know how much do you earn, where have you lived before, what's your age. He needs some kind of ID. So for that point, it's just part of the process of social work to get ready to give away that data and provide the data. And of course, that's the data we also collect for our evaluation. Well, maybe you will want to add something.
No, I mean, it is possible in the first phase. If you, for example, you don't have like your documents because you've been rough sleeping and lost all of your documents, then of course you can apply for the first phase, and the social work will support you on an intense phase to apply for new documents, of course, but like a total anonymity is not possible in that program. There are also some legal issues that we need to, that we have guidelines, and there is also like a point of transparency about us paying these funds, so to say.
And by staying in staying anonymous, it won't be possible to apply for social benefits, for housing benefits, and for all the things you need in order to be able to rent an apartment and cover the monthly costs of an apartment. So you have to be included in the social welfare system, and therefore it's the basis to have an ID and to be able to share your data. But it can be a long process, and it's a very important task of social work to work with the clients together on this, and helping to figure out if it's possible, what the client needs in order to be able to do this.
And about the first question, you said the link in the chat to the page of the Limited Profit Housing Association should also have some information about the law, the so-called Wohnungsgemeinnützigkeitsgesetz. And maybe it was not so clear in the presentation, but these upfront costs, deposits, and also financial contributions are for all tenants of these segments. So it's not only for the Housing First tenants, but for all of them. And that's why there is also a law and equality in that administration of the Limited Profit Housing Association.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if there's any other questions. I know we're almost done, but I have one tiny little one. Just I wanted to say how impressive it is that you're able to reach out to so many, like that broad ethos definition of homelessness, and that you're able to include and reach so many women. And I think that that's something that's quite interesting, because we don't always see that in sort of generalized Housing First programs, to have such a high participation rate of women and families. And I just wondered if there was anything else you wanted to say about that, because I found it's quite a useful and it's quite a unique and interesting aspect of the Austrian example.
Well, yes, just for the data, we see that we reach around 50%. Around 50% of our grown-up clients are female, both in eviction prevention and in Housing First. So that's a lot compared to official statistics of homelessness, and also to shelters and temporary accommodation, where the share of women always lies around maybe 30%. Yeah. Well, what was your question? That's
what we want to share about it.
What we want to share about it.
Yeah, I think it's what we learned is that this number of 30% in the shelters cannot be true, as we have almost 50% female adults in Austria. I don't know if it's 50%, but I think a little more actually. So it can't be the truth. And by being open to different situations and also the projects in Austria before the arriving home and before the program WOHNSCHIRM Housing First, also recognized that it is possible to reach women in different situations. And of course, there are some shelters for women only in Austria, but most of them are like for all genders. And we know that safety issues can be a hurdle or an obstacle for women to go into a shelter or to housing units because of fear, because of fear of stigmatization, because of children, because of different regulations also in those services. And when it's going to have a known apartment, it is for all genders very a very attractive goal. So,
and what I want to add is that we cannot assume a person is safe because he or she is not sleeping rough. Yeah? It's maybe as dangerous as sleeping rough to a woman who keeps on couch surfing with men she met in the evening in the streets because she doesn't have a place to stay. Yeah? So that's something that seems very important to us to keep that in mind, that we, especially when it comes to women, we have a blind spot in the situations they live in when they don't have their own housing.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. I think probably, I don't know, Saoirse, do you want to say anything in closing for today?
Just a big thank you to Andrea and Emine for agreeing and for coming and presenting. I think it was really useful and really interesting also for me to hear about the detail of the program and very inspiring what you're doing in Austria.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
But thanks to everybody also for being here. You can keep up with EPOCH Practice, like I mentioned, on our newsletter and our social medias. And we're really glad that this was presented also with the Housing First Europe Hub for working with us, who have their brand new website also launched. So also keep up to date with them and what they're doing. But I wish you all a nice start to the weekend coming up. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye, thanks everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Goodbye. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.